Who's better to talk about managing from afar, especially during this time, than the one person who literally wrote the book on the subject? Kevin Eikenberry's book was published back in 2018, and he certainly proved to be prescient. The question I had for Eikenberry was the extent to which working remotely requires a different type of manager or a leader. His answer was emphatic: leadership first, location second. This is the second episode in a series on law firm leadership in times of crisis. Welcome to Law Firm Weekly. It's great to have you here. Kevin Eikenberry is a leadership expert, a two-time best-selling author, speaker, consultant, trainer, and a coach. He's the Chief Potential Officer of the Eikenberry Group. Kevin's specialties include leadership, teams and teamwork, organizational culture, facilitation change, and organizational learning. Kevin, welcome to the studio.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Shai.
Oh, yeah.
We just meet recently, and now we're doing this, and it's fantastic. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, and at the top of this conversation, I called you David. So, it's really, really bad on my part to forget your name. But here we go, Kevin. I'm really excited because the topic we're going to talk about today is so important to so many of our viewers. But before we get there, I can't avoid the obvious, which is to ask you about the title, Chief Potential Officer, and maybe in the same time you can talk about the Kevin Eikenberry Group and what you do.
Well, so first of all, when you are the owner of the company, and as someone once said, when you write the checks, the fact is you can call yourself whatever you want. And so if there weren't such a thing, I picked the title of Chief Potential Officer a long time ago. And if it wasn't, if there weren't people in the world that would call themselves Chief Learning Officer, that's probably what I would have picked. But my goal was to pick something that was meaningful and unique and that would get people to ask me. And so you did. So we're in the business of helping leaders and teams reach their potential. So I am the Chief Potential Officer.
Oh, that's fantastic. It really is amazing because we know that people can and are trying to improve all the time. But you know what? Our focus today is on remote leadership. And Kevin, you literally wrote the book on the subject. It's called The Long Distant Leader. We'll have a link to it right here below. And obviously, it's such a critical topic that so many people are dealing with today. You wrote the book in 2018, so obviously you didn't foresee, God forbid, the pandemic that we are facing here. But obviously, the trend of working from home and the challenges that it poses to leaders and to managers is, and it has been something that has been on your mind, clearly, and others. Are you seeing anything different today when we look at how the business world is reacting to it and working from home or remotely? Are you seeing anything that changes your mind around the premise that was behind your book at the time?
Well, yeah. So we wrote the book because we were working with clients in this area, and we knew that it was a trend that was growing. And I've been now leading a remote team for a decade, right? So we were convinced then that this wasn't going away. How do I feel about it now? Well, anyone who worried or thought it was a fad, that cat is out of the bag. Even if you bring people back to your office, you're not going to bring them all back every day. Because even if you would like to, they've proven that in many cases they can work from home or they can work remotely. And so I think that we're going to have more of this than ever. In fact, what we're going to have in the future, I believe, is a lot more hybrid teams, what we call a hybrid team. Some in, some not.
And this is what I'm hearing from so many people that I'm interviewing from the legal space. I talk to COOs, I talk to managing partners and everything in between. And they're all expecting things to change, that this is kind of a pilot, a major pilot, unfortunately forced on us.
Pilot. right?
A forced pilot, absolutely. But that it's showing them the ability for their organization to work effectively remotely, and therefore will change their opinion about how many of their staff, lawyers and others, will need to continuously be in the office, or, to your point, what is that hybrid? But I want to ask you maybe a fundamental question. And reading a little bit from your book, I didn't read the whole book, but as much as I could, you are talking about the fact that leadership from afar and leadership and how people exercise it, it's a bit of a nuance as opposed to a huge difference between, leadership when you do it remotely and just every day.
Yeah, so the subtitle of the book is Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership. And so the first rule in the book is leadership first, location second. So listen, every one of you that's watching us, or most of you, are in a leadership role and you know something about leading. And you're not perfect at it, but you know something. You're not starting at zero. And just now that you're doing it remotely, it's not starting over. It's taking what we already know, the principles that have been at play for leaders forever, and applying them to this nuance of people working in a different location. And so I have a mentor who taught me, it wasn't an original idea with him, but he taught it to me, that little hinges swing big doors. And so Shai, in this conversation, we're going to talk about little hinges, small differences that we can make that will make a huge difference in the results that we get as a leader of a remote team and as a remote worker ourselves in many cases.
What are the practical ways managers and leaders should follow in order to overcome a sense of loss of control? I think a lot of them are feeling that because they cannot see their people sitting right beside them, either between 9 to 5 or 9 to 2 o'clock in the morning, depending what role you are in the firm.
Right.
They're kind of feeling, I do not have control over outcomes. Or is it the wrong question? Maybe trying to control everything is a fundamental problem.
It's absolutely the wrong question. It's what it is. It's you had the illusion of control before, because just because they were sitting in their office or at their cubicle or whatever, just because they were there doesn't mean they were working. And even if they were working, doesn't mean they were working on the right stuff or doing it in a productive manner. So we may have had an illusion of control. And in fact, if you're trying, you were or are trying to exert control, I think you're missing the boat, because you have control over yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your choices. We can only influence others.
So setting goals for everyone on the team, for yourself included, as a leader and as a manager, obviously, making it very obvious, making it clear explicitly is obviously one way to ensure that even remotely, things are clear and are measurable, and you can basically allow your staff and team to gauge progress.
More than just goals. Everything you said, yes. 100 times yes to everything you said. But more than just goals. Expectations. So if we have expectations, not only about what needs to be done, but how it's going to be done. And it's different now, because some of the things that happened through incidental and serendipitous and accidental conversations before that greased the skids and helped things get done now aren't happening. If you ask me the bigger question, though, about what's the biggest thing we need to do, what's the biggest nuance, back to your earlier idea, is that everything you do as a leader now remotely has to be far more intentional than it was before. Because there's a whole lot of things that maybe happened before when you saw them down the hall. You remembered that, you had that conversation with them, and now it all has to be intentional.
Rule number 11 in your book says, building
well, I'm glad you're going to tell me, because otherwise it'd be a test and I might fail the test.
Is saying, building trust at a distance does not happen by accident.
When we are together, we have more sense of competence. We have a better sense of being able to create a common purpose and understand that we're all heading in the same direction. And so those are two of the three parts of our trust triangle: common purpose and competence. And the third corner in that triangle is motive. So if we don't know what people's motives are, then we might trust them less. Or if we assume that their intent is negative or self-focused, then we won't trust them as much. And when we have less information, which we do when we're working remotely, we often tend to assume the worst. And so we have to do things to create an infused trust with the team. If we want to maintain where it was, hopefully build it moving forward.
I don't want to go there too far because now we're getting into psychology and, this is definitely not my expertise by any means. It seems to me that trust in others is also a reflection of trust in yourself. And when you don't trust yourself, for whatever reason, it's very difficult for you to trust others as well on a very deep level. So knowing what we know about the widespread adoption of video conferencing, this wonderful but also can be quite annoying tool that we now have like Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is that we're using right now.
Right.
How can managers and leaders use this tool, that being said, that is so accessible and fairly easy and that now people are so relatively comfortable with? What is it about this medium that you think could help them manage better, lead better?
Think about it. Basically, our communication comes in 3 buckets. How we receive a message comes in 3 buckets. It comes in the words that we say, the transcript. That's an email. The way we say it, tone, pitch, volume, inflection, that you can get on the phone call, on a podcast, right? And then there is how we look. So what we say, how we say it, how we look. We can get how we look with the video camera. Is it exactly the same as being in the same room? No, but it's a lot better.
I'm wondering what you think makes a long distance leader remarkable. This is one of the topics that you touch in the book. What makes them unique?
We think about leadership as being 3 O's: outcomes, others, and ourselves. And so we spent a lot of time in the book talking about those 3 things. And notice that the first question you asked me, or one of the first questions you asked me, was about control. How do I make sure I can control my people so that they get the work done? You're asking both questions, outcomes and others, but not necessarily balancing them in the best possible way. Right? We've got to get the outcomes. Of course, that's why the firm exists. That's how we create revenue. Yes. But if we don't have people feeling like they can do their best work, we're not going to deliver the best results for our clients.
One last question, and that's actually picking up on this term feeling. I had a conversation yesterday with Seth Weissman. He's a general counsel with Marqeta, very thoughtful person when it comes to leadership and human resources. And he's a great believer in EQ, emotional quotient. How much is that playing into this idea of a remarkable leader in general?
Well, I'm going to frame your question a little differently. So I'm going to answer the question you asked and the question that you didn't ask. And the question that you asked is, can you be a remarkable leader without having high emotional intelligence? And I would say you cannot, because we are leading human beings. And so we must be self-aware enough about ourselves and how we're impacting others through and influencing them through our actions. And we must understand where they are so that we can help best meet their needs. I believe, Shai, that right now we are in what I call the age of empathy, that the best leaders are always empathetic, understanding where their team members are, what's going on with them, how they're, feeling. And now, perhaps more than ever, that's at least obvious to us that we need to do it.
That has been a very interesting conversation, Kevin. Thank you so much for sharing your views and vision and insights. I think it will be very helpful for people to hear this message. Some of them are struggling with it, but clearly you've been thinking about it for a long time, even obviously before this pandemic. So thanks again. I appreciate it.
Well, it was a pleasure to be with you. And people can learn more. They can go to they can go to remoteleadershipinstitute.com, which is our site for all things about remote leadership and remote work, remoteleadershipinstitute.com.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kevin.